He's a former top 150 ATP Doubles player, an All-American at Pepperdine University. He's a world-class sports psychologist who is mentored by the legendary Alan Fox. He's the owner of Mentally Tough Tennis, and it's my pleasure to welcome Anthony Ross to Off Court.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Good to be here.
Anthony, I want to dive straight in and ask you some questions, but before I get there, I want to ask you, how did you get into this world of sports psychology?
I guess my first experience of sports psych was when I went to college. I played at Pepperdine, and my first season at Pepperdine was a bit of a disaster performance-wise. So I didn't do too well at all. And actually, at the end of that season, Peter Smith, who you know, I think came in as the new coach, basically told me he didn't want me on the team, which was fair enough because I'd done terribly in the first season, and but I really loved it at Pepperdine. And in the end, we worked out based on the scholarship that I think he offered me 40% scholarship. It was a pretty expensive school, and so we worked out that if I went home to Australia for a semester, I could come back, and it was basically you could double the scholarship because I was only there for half the year. And so we worked it out that I did that. And during that time, I came back, and actually Alan Fox was the coach at Pepperdine right before I got there. And so I actually I know him a little bit, but my main mentor was his brother, Michael Fox, who's a psychologist in Australia. So I came back and worked with Michael Fox that semester, which was really, really helpful. So that got me really interested in it. And then I stayed in touch with Michael Fox after that. And as I played and learning about how important it was to my own performance, that was the first thing. When I went back to college, started applying a lot of the stuff that we talked about, and that was really beneficial. And then I think the second main thing was when after I'd finished, or I was finishing playing, I was playing on the tour, but I was also coaching at the same time. And my first coaching gig was actually Peter Clark, who you know. And so I was coaching Clarkey, and that was like a really challenging first coaching gig because, as you know, Clarkey's like a sort of pretty crazy guy. And then I coached another guy who also was, I would say, was an underachiever and pretty loose mentally. And I just realized I didn't have the skills as a coach to work with these guys effectively long term. And so then what happened was I came back to Australia. I got back in touch with Michael Fox, and I said, I really want to get into the psych stuff. And it sort of followed along from there. I was coaching while I was finishing my psych degree, and then slowly transitioned across purely to doing the psych stuff.
Anthony, that's interesting. It's cool that you've taken your personal experiences and then, developed them into something that you love, and now you're giving back to the tennis community and helping people out. I want to give you a statement. Tennis is 80% mental. True or false?
I would say false. It's something that we hear quite a bit, isn't it? And I think the way I've come to think about how the importance of the mental game is I would generally say it's 25% mental. I like to just split the four general components of tennis into four. To me, they're pretty equal, where you've got the physical, you've got the tactical, you've got the technical, and then you've got the mental components. And I really don't think one is any more important than the other. So we could think of it like 25% each. I think the important part in reflecting on it is that we need to realize, especially when we're trying to help players, is they all rely on each other. And so I think the most important thing is that from a developmental point of view is that we look at players and we look at all four components and make sure that we're helping them in every component, because without one, the other three become, quite worthless. And I think even more than that, I was just having a discussion about this with a coach in the last couple of days. And we were talking about more than them relying on each other, they all affect each other. So it's like they're all intertwined, So the mental components are very important in technical components from the point of view that it takes mental toughness to get out there and work effectively on improving your game. We could say the same about physical components. Like physically, the physically fitter we are, generally the mentally tougher we are going to be, because it takes by developing our physical fitness, that is developing mental toughness at the same time. So all these components are intertwined. And I think, yeah, I definitely wouldn't say 80%. I think it's very, very important. And I think it is, out of the four components, I think it is most often the element that players lack. That's my experience. You know, we all spend so much time, you know, these days, physically, technically, obviously a massive amount of time and focus, tactically more and more, I think, especially with all the analytics and out there. And I think most often when I see a player who is underachieving, it's the most common thing that I look at a player and go, you know what, they lack the mental components of the game.
Why do you think that players are not wanting to work on the mental side as much, or coaches are not instilling that as much? Is it because it's quite hard to measure? I imagine the physical skills quite hard to quite easy to measure, but mental skills are a little bit trickier, right? They go up and down a lot.
Yeah, I think that is one thing. So it's their softer skills. So it's harder to look at and go, yes, like the physical stuff, this is where they've improved. Or technically, you can sit there and look at the forehand, and it's a lot easier to judge and see how things are going. Whereas mental perhaps is more complex. I think the other thing is it's harder to, you know, if I talk to a lot of coaches, a very common thing coaches report is they say, you know what, we know what mental toughness is, we know what we want our players to be doing, but we don't really have a system. We don't know what is the process to teach our players to get mentally tougher.